So just to begin by introducing myself, my name is Jodie Hunter. Thank you for the lovely introduction. I come from a large Cook Island family, so I'm half Cook Island and half Pākehā, and also have the pleasure of being able to work very closely with my mother, Jodie Hunter. So we both lead the Developing Mathematical Inquiry Community's professional learning and development and research work. And what I'll be talking about today is the things that we've learned really through this work about how we can engage all students in mathematics. So just to begin with, we really have structured the talk that we're giving at these hui's around the proposed government work plan. So we were really interested with the new government to have a look at what they were proposing to do. And if you look at this diagram, this was one of the documents that came out in thinking about what can we do in regards to education and changes in New Zealand. And when we looked at that, we thought the work that we do in schools and have been doing on an ongoing basis for a number of years now really fits into this nicely. So what I'll be talking about today is how the work and the research and development work that we do with schools aligns with each of these areas. To begin with, I wanted to just talk about where does this work come from and why are we doing this? So really our work at the heart of it is about challenging the status quo. For a long time, mathematics has been a subject which I think is about exclusion rather than inclusion. So mathematics has been used as a tool to exclude particular learners from career pathways, from opportunities in life, but even from access in the classroom. So really our work is about thinking, how can we change what it means to be successful in mathematics? And also a big part of that is who can be successful in mathematics. I think of myself and my history of my family, and I think if I look at myself and my history in my Cook Island family, I can say that I come from a long history of mathematicians. And every person who is Pacifica and Māori comes from a long history of mathematics. But yet that's been discounted, both in our curriculum, in our schools, and by learners themselves, and teachers as well, I'd say. Why I say I come from a long history of mathematics is because our ancestors used navigation to travel all around the Pacific. And there's nothing more mathematical than navigation. It's pure mathematics at the heart. But I also look at the Te-vai-vai quilts, and I'll show you one of those in a little bit that my grandmother makes, and that's pure mathematics as well. Architecture, building, our craft work, all of that is mathematical and mathematics. Even in the ways that we work, I think can be aligned in terms of collaboration with the ways that mathematicians work. So all of that we can draw together to say who can be successful at mathematics, not necessarily the people who have been positioned as typically successful. Part of challenging the status quo is also thinking about how we can widen what success means. So I think with national standards, my feelings about that and what I've seen happen in a lot of cases is that there's become a very narrow definition of what it means to be successful. So when a child starts school, being successful meant that you could count to 10 or count to 100 in English. But all the other aspects of mathematics were discounted as, irrelevant. And I think that's come through in some of the comments that we hear, unfortunately, from teachers when talking about children in mathematics. So one of the common comments that I hear a lot of the time when we talk about using challenging tasks and getting children to work at the, top of where they can possibly work is that you don't understand these children come to school with nothing. They have no maths. And we really challenge that because we say that's completely impossible. Nobody can have no mathematics. In fact, it's about opening our eyes up as educators to seeing what mathematics is in the home and in community that we can draw out and build upon. And the unfortunate thing about this as well is children themselves deficit theorise about who they are. And we've got lots of evidence this from interviews that we've done with children. So we have children who talk about, we ask the question, How do you feel being whatever culture you are in the mathematics classroom? So we have a whole group of children who just say, well, maths has nothing to do with my culture. That's, to me, concerning, but even more concerning is that when we've done interviews with children at particular clusters of schools, we've had 20 to 30% of children say things like, I'm Tokelauan, and Tokelauans don't do maths. Or I'm Samoan, and in the maths classroom, I have to become a Palangi, and then when maths finishes, I can go back to being Samoan again. So it's also about challenging these perceptions from the children themselves and showing them that, in fact, they are mathematical, they come from a culture that's mathematical, and they can be great mathematicians as well. So, how do we do that? Firstly, we think about learners at the centre of the work that we do. So this means that we need to use what we can call both culturally responsive and culturally sustaining approaches. Instead of viewing language and culture of students as a deficit, we can see them as a strength to support, to nurture and empower. That means for everybody, I think, stepping back and thinking about your cultural identity. What do you know about culture? How well do you know the learners in your classroom and who's sitting in front of you? And I mean truly know, not just at a surface level. That's hard work, and it really means that you have to build relationships, both with the children who are in your classroom, but you also have to build relationships with parents and the community, and be able to use those relationships to work together so that we can have success for all of our learners. When we talk about culture with New Zealand teachers, often teachers only see culturally responsive teaching as a tool really to get children to buy into problems. If I use a problem that involves the children's culture, then they'll want to do the problem. But I think we need to start seeing it as so much more than that. Because really, culturally responsive, culturally sustaining teaching is really a holistic principle of teaching. And this benefits all children, because if we think about our classrooms, they're a microcosm of society. And we want all of our children to walk away from our classrooms realising that other people's cultures have strengths in them, being able to positively relate to each other, to be able to have understanding and empathy for different people and understand different people's values. And if we think about culturally responsive teaching or culturally sustaining teaching in that sense, then we can think about this as a way of doing good for everybody and for our society. So I'd just like to give you a moment to think about yourself and what are your core values and beliefs which you grew up with. So just have a minute to think about, when you grew up, what were the core values that you were taught, maybe by your parents or at home or through your classroom interactions. And then stop and think about, how may these affect your interactions within the classroom? So when I think about some of the values that we hear people talking about, people will say things like, I was brought up with the value that if you work hard, you will succeed. But then I stop to think about, how does that affect our interactions with students in the classroom? Because essentially, I think what we're saying there is that if everybody works hard, everybody will succeed. But the way our classrooms and our curriculum and even our teaching at times is set up doesn't work that way. Other kinds of things that we hear people talking about are, you've got to be a winner in life. So that becomes a competitive focus. And if we start thinking about the interactions in our classroom, that can lead to emphasis on speed, getting something right quickly, so correct answers. But your values also might impact ways that you think you learn. So do you learn by listening or do you learn through speaking? Or a bit of both? Do you learn by explaining? Do you learn by asking questions? Okay, so if we start thinking about this, I think it's really at the core of all our work that our values and beliefs have a huge impact in the classroom, and we need to start unpacking what our own personal values and beliefs are and how they might affect the interactions that are developed in the mathematics classroom, how they might affect who has more opportunities to participate and learn within the interactions. but also who has less opportunities to participate. So if we think about values and beliefs of both ourselves, but also particular groups of learners in the classroom, we can think about a continuum. So there's really a continuum of communalism and collectivism at one end, and individualism and competitiveness at the other end. Then other values in between those as well. If we think about Māori, Cook Island, Tokelauan, Samoan, all the Pacific Island nations, often the values and beliefs of these learners are commonalities which shape the interactions and how you are as a Pacific person. And often they sit at the end of communalism and collectivism. But assessment processes that we've used in school have had a huge impact, I think, on achievement in this sense, because often we're looking at assessment as an individual process and as a type of competitive process. So that puts a whole lot of people outside of achieving and being who they are and able to achieve in that kind of a way. So what we need to do is map out our own beliefs, and that offers us an opportunity to see how they collide with a more communal view. A key challenge is for us as teachers to interrogate our own values and beliefs, as I said before, and how that's shaped by our upbringing and our past experiences. Think about whether you identify things such as being the best, being the neatest, hard work makes you a winner. How does that fit in with these types of values in this continuum? Or whether it's about nobody is successful unless everybody understands. Or with multiple strengths we can achieve so much more. Our professional development activity really looks at how we can engage teachers in looking at how values shape interactions, classroom interactions, with both Pacifica and Māori students, and opportunities to look at how individualistic beliefs can collide with communal beliefs and ways of participating. So what we look to do is really critically reflect on what perceptions we have of students. Because for some groups of students, they're often positioned as lower status in the classroom, and this means that they have less opportunities to participate and interact. Instead, what we need to do is start thinking about why are these students reluctant to interact and to question and challenge, and think about ways that we can make this safe in the classroom or culturally acceptable ways to ask questions. So to do that, we look at barrier-free access. In our work, we use a SMART tool, and the SMART tool we use is a communication and participation framework. So we work on the basis that it's not natural for all students to come into the classroom and know how to communicate and participate in a productive way. So as teachers, we need to offer students opportunities to be able to communicate and participate. And how can we do this? Through particular teacher actions that we set up in the classroom. So our communication and participation framework offers teachers opportunities to reflect on your practice and to see why particular students may not be participating and communicating, and to look at what actions you could try and use and change to ensure that all students are participating and communicating. What else do we use? I have mixed ability grouping up here, but I'd really, I put mixed ability because I think that's what people can identify with. But I think that really in mathematics we need to start getting, well, across everything, we need to start getting rid of the notion of ability, because that's been a huge part of what excludes learners in the mathematics classroom. Because we talk about high ability, low ability students, stage 4s, stage 5s, over curriculum, national standards, what was it? My overs and my unders. And all of those kind of labels are what means that children don't have opportunities to do rich mathematics. So instead of thinking about high ability or low ability, think about what exactly are you talking about when you're talking about that. Are you talking just about number? Are you talking about students who can ask questions, who can support each other's learning? Are you talking about students who can use multiple representations, who can come up with a conjecture? When we start thinking about all the different multiple abilities that you can have in mathematics, that means that there's no such thing as high ability and low ability. What else do we talk about using? Group-worthy problems. So, A group-worthy problem is a problematic task with a low floor and a high ceiling. So in the classrooms and the schools that we work in, we think that every child should have access to rich mathematics and to challenging complex problems. Nobody is excluded from this. But the children work together in a collaborative, supportive environment on these types of tasks, which we say are low floor, high ceiling. So the notion of low floor is that everybody can enter the task. The notion of high ceiling is that everybody exits that task with a different understanding and a different piece of mathematical learning. We're not saying that everybody would leave that task having developed the same understanding, but there's multiple levels of an understanding, and all of those understandings are valuable. And the last part of that is using culturally responsive problems. So problems which link in or tap into the children's cultural identity to highlight how mathematics is part of everybody's culture. I'm just going to show you an example of one of the tasks that we designed to show this. Okay, so, sorry, I forgot to mention that the Te Vai back on that upper page is one of my grandmother's designs. Okay, and if you looked at my grandmother, you would probably position her as somebody who was not mathematical as such, because she came from a tiny island, Manahiki in the Cook Islands, came to New Zealand when she was 15 on a boat, didn't do school past probably 10 years old, basically. But I see her, what she does is mathematical in terms of the Te Vai. And not just in geometry, because I think often we look at these and say, oh, there's lots of geometry and shape in this. But I look at it with my eyes looking for algebra, and I can say there's a heap of algebra in this as well. I apologise because I know this is quite small. We see this as a low floor, high ceiling task. The reason being we use this in Year 2 classroom. Because I don't like to think the curriculum as limiting as such. So even though growing patterns like this don't come into the curriculum until about Year 4 or Year 5, I think that we can get children to be doing these much earlier. So this was used in a Year 2 classroom at a school in Mangere, so Koru School, if anybody knows that school, with a little class of Year 2 students. We chose this task particularly because we knew that we had Cook Island children in the classroom, and we wanted to highlight the mathematics that comes from Cook Island culture, and also for those children to be able to have a little bit of, status and expertise in explaining about the Te Vai process and how they'd seen their mamas making Te Vai, and everybody got together and sewed it together, and it's a communal activity. But we use this as a growing pattern because I was looking at the Te Vai my grandmother was making, and that particular design at the top, I saw it and thought, oh wow, that's a really interesting growing pattern. So I'll explain it to you because it's probably a little bit hard to see there. But you've got four leaves in the middle of it, and then each time it adds on, it grows by 8 leaves. So you've got a constant of 4 in the middle, and then each time it's growing by 8 leaves. Okay, we see this as a low floor, high ceiling task because when we used this with this class of Year 2s, we had students who were working at all kinds of levels. There were children in there who had high special needs, who were working probably about 3 or 4 year old level, practicing one-to-one counting. This task gave them opportunities to practice one-to-one counting, but it also gave them opportunities to listen to their peers' explanations who had gone into other generalisations. So the children, after working on this task for 2 or 3 days, came up with generalisations for the bottom question, which is, can you describe what the pattern would look like for the 76th position? So we had children talking about how it would look like 4 in the middle and then 8 76 times. We had other children talking about how you'd have 4 in the middle and then you'd have 2 76 times here and 2 76 times here and so on like that. And we had other children talking about how you'd have 4 in the middle and you'd have 76 leaves, 76, 76, essentially 76 8 times. Okay, so I can start thinking about all the multiple opportunities that the children had from this task here. So they had opportunities for counting, they had opportunities for practicing skip counting, they had opportunities to practice multiplication, they were able to generalise, they were able to prove what they were talking about, all of that from this one task. So part of why we use tasks like this is because we think that we need to challenge perceptions. It's really hard to shift our own views and to shift teachers' views of student capability unless we see them engaging in different activity. If we keep just the focus on number and counting and low-level activities, it's really hard to show what the children can do. So in doing this, in challenging teachers' perceptions of student capability and children's perceptions themselves, we can redefine what it means to do mathematics. But we also provide multiple opportunities for students to demonstrate their strengths in multiple ways. So doing mathematics and being good at mathematics is not only about number, it's about a whole lot of content areas, but it's also about a whole lot of different practices. Questioning, agreeing, disagreeing, supporting others, building on somebody's ideas, justifying your thinking. And the final part of that is let's remove all notions of ability and instead say all students can learn mathematics. Everybody can do mathematics, not just a certain select group. I just want you to have a think about your own classroom and have a look at this as a different type of a problem. What are the strengths that different students in your class might use to solve this collaboratively? So just quickly talk to the person sitting next to you about that. Great to hear you talking about that. I'd also make the comment here that I think in our mathematics, what we want to do is widen all the time the opportunities that children have. So I think for a long time we've been quite stuck into a narrow focus, particularly in primary schools, of looking at number, and we've stuck to these rules, really artificial rules I think that we were given about how much you should be doing number and how much you should be doing strand, so you should be doing number 80% of the time and strand 20% of the time. And I think we need to kind of move away from all of those kind of false rules and dichotomies and start thinking about how numbers really integrated across the curriculum. So we can do much richer tasks by looking at what we call strand, but I just call mathematics, like tasks like this, and think about how number then is part of this anyway. So we can be doing number all the time as part of what else we're doing. So the other part, another aspect of what our work is about is quality teaching. So we use the frame of ambitious teaching. So we talk about ambitious mathematics teaching. This is really hard work. So I know when I go in and work in a school and with teachers that this is hard intellectual work for us to teach mathematics in an ambitious way. It's much easier to tell children, you solve the problem like this, now everybody practice. But turning the teaching on its head and giving children complex problems and letting them come up with the solutions, and then thinking about when we step in and when we step out and what mathematical idea am I going to follow, and what are different children saying, and what does that mean about their reasoning, that's really hard work. So ambitious teaching really requires us to reconstruct our practice. It's not about slight tweaking, it's about thinking, really challenging what we mean by mathematics, what it means to do mathematics, and how we teach mathematics. So significant reconstruction of practice. But it's also an opportunity to develop more sophisticated forms of knowledge, maths knowledge for teaching. So I don't think where any teacher's starting point is, it's no different than children. We can all do maths, we can all learn maths. And when I walk into a school and teachers say to me, but I'm not really good at maths, and everybody can be good at maths. And actually teaching in this way gives you multiple opportunities to develop your own mathematical understanding. It also means that we need to have new perspectives on teaching and learning, and what is our role in teaching and learning. And finally, we need to have new forms of teaching in which student thinking is elicited and built from. So really what this means is we need to be hardworking, energetic mathematics teachers. The final part of this is thinking about quality, inclusive public education. So in the work that we do, we are an intensive professional learning and development and research project. So teachers who in the schools that we're working in have access to sustained quality professional learning through professional learning days. So we work with schools and take staff meetings and PLD days, but a huge part of our work is also our team coming in and working in the classroom, co-constructing mathematics lessons. We take a different form of professional learning and development, so we don't model and we don't observe, but we work alongside teachers to redevelop what mathematics teaching looks like. We also have access to university courses which are focused on this work, and a process called lesson study, which is a form of collaborative professional development that we work with schools in their 3rd or 4th year of working with us. And the final part of this is teachers learning from parents about mathematics used in the home setting. So we advocate for different forms of parent meetings. Rather than parents coming along and being told what you need to do to support your child in maths, we say have parents come along and talk to teachers about what mathematics is already happening, that parents might not recognise as mathematics, and teachers also need to reconstruct what they see as mathematics. And the very last thing is thinking about 21st century learning. So the key components of this are giving students a voice, learner-led inquiry, giving children flexibility, and mathematics for life. And I just want to finish off, because I know I'm running over time, with just some quotes from teachers and from the students. So here's one teacher talking about a little boy in her classroom from Pacific Island Nation who would not say anything in maths ever. Now it's getting him to shut up. That's the trick. And another teacher from one of our schools in Porirua talking about a girl in her class who's an amazing mathematician. And she said to me that the biggest thing she's learnt this year is that she needs to listen to other people, and she doesn't have all the answers, and she's not the best at maths. And finally, just the words of, and I think this is very interesting because I talked about the Tokelauan boy who said Tokelauans don't do maths. So this is from our schools in Porirua. This is from a year 3 Tokelauan boy. Okay, and this is, we started working with these schools in 2015, so a year 3 who's come through all his schooling like this, and when the teacher asked him, how do you feel being Tokelauan in the mathematics classroom, this was his response. My culture is in everything I do. It is in everything I do, and it is always supposed to be in everything I do.